Hi everyone, just a short video now as the AAIB have published a special bulletin. Just a reminder that these are reports published during an investigation to highlight initial facts and, where appropriate, make urgent safety recommendations. They are generally used to inform the aviation industry and the public of the general circumstances of accidents and serious incidents. So the report S1/2025 special concerns the crash of a Rockwell Commander registration November 4698 Whiskey just 2 days before Christmas on the 23rd of December last year. The 50-year-old pilot with 187 hours of flight experience was unfortunately killed. He's been named in the media, but I really don't think it's necessary to do that for the purposes of this video. The aircraft was based at Fife Airport near Glenroves and was owned by the pilot. On the day of the accident, the CCTV at the airport showed the pilot arriving at 11 AM and walking to the aircraft, which was parked at the southwestern end of the apron. Now, the CCTV didn't capture any pre-takeoff checks the pilot made due to the area being obscured by parked aircraft. The reason this is important becomes obvious later. A witness reported that the engine of the aircraft was running for approximately 20 minutes before the pilot began to taxi at 11:28. The pilot reported on the radio that he was to depart for a brief local flight and then return. The aircraft was seen entering the runway, backtracking runway 24 and then coming to a stop. The engine ran at high power for 20 seconds, presumably a run-up check, and then the takeoff run began at 11:33. CCTV recorded the aircraft climbing out to the southwest until 11:34 when it appeared to depart from controlled flight, entering a spin. The footage from the CCTV isn't in the public domain, so we're not able to show it and review it here. A witness reported hearing a brief mayday call from the pilot, and as I've said before, the pilot was fatally injured in the impact. The ADS-B data playback isn't particularly insightful, but just shows what we already know, that the aircraft reaches an altitude of around 1,000 feet before entering a sharp descent with a maximum rate of nearly 4,500 feet per minute, consistent with a spin, and at that altitude, obviously, there's no chance of recovery. Video footage from the media, as you can see here, shows that the aircraft crashed just outside of a bushy area to the north of the village of Kinglassie. The left wing was more substantially damaged than the right, suggesting a shallow left roll at the time of impact, and the landing gear was found to be up and the propeller was in fine pitch, and there was impact damage to the propeller, suggesting it was windmilling without power at the time of the crash. So due to damage, it wasn't possible to determine the position of the magneto switches or the fuel tank selector valves. The left fuel tank was ruptured and no fuel was remaining within it, but the AAIB had managed to recover 20 litres of fuel from the right wing main tank. When looking into aviation accidents, the AAIB will always look at the maintenance history of the aircraft, and this accident is no different. So, interestingly, the pilot had previously reported finding water in the fuel tanks just before a maintenance inspection in July 2024. The maintenance organisation found that the O-rings on the fuel filler caps were in poor condition, which could have been the cause for this, and these were replaced. If you're unfamiliar with light aircraft and their fuel systems and the checks required before flight, I'm just going to take you now to Nottingham for a short video just to explain a few things. So I'm here at a very cold and misty morning in Nottingham City Airport in Golf Romeo Charlie. First flight of the day, so I'll just show you the fuel checks we do before a flight. Okay, so first thing you'll notice in a light aircraft is the fuel caps. Simple screw with a seal, which can become worn over time. You see the tank ports are on the top of the wing, meaning that any rain potentially can get underneath and leak into the fuel tanks, contaminating the fuel. Now, we're lucky that our aircraft here at Nottingham are hangared overnight, but obviously if they're out in the day and there's rain, there is a potential risk for that. Other thing we need to check regarding the fuel before a flight, the first flight of the day, is a drain. So we use these fuel ports, drain some fuel. Not sure if you can appreciate the colour, it's slight blue in colour. Give it a smell. Smells like fuel to me. Any debris will fall to the bottom generally, and if there's water present, you'd be able to see that as a clear colour compared to the blue. I'll pour that back in the tank. Do the same on the opposite tank, but also, which I'll just show you now, is this one here, which is just the fuel sump and filter. So again, giving that a drain. Sometimes they leak a bit, so you just need to make sure they're closed properly. And again, I'll hold that against the white. Hopefully you can appreciate the blue colour in the fuel. And that is how you check the fuel on a light aircraft before flight. There was a subsequent inspection in October 2024 because during a flight the aircraft's engine had stopped unexpectedly during rollout after landing, and the organisation found that all 8 spark plugs had a sooty appearance. They were cleaned and tested, but one of them was replaced because it was worn beyond acceptable limits. Following successful engine runs, the aircraft was released back to service on the 30th of October 2024, and the pilot flew the aircraft a couple of days later on the 2nd of November. After that, the aircraft was parked outside and not flown for the following 7 weeks until the accident flight on the 23rd of December. Now, if you think back to what we've already discussed, October, November and December are the wettest months in Scotland, and the aircraft was outside and uncovered apart from a covering to the cockpit canopy for that 7-week period, exposing it to significant amounts of rain. When the AAIB tested the fuel they recovered from the right wing tank, they found there was significant water contamination throughout the whole fuel system, downstream of the fuel selector and in the left wheel sump drain. As part of the pre-flight checks, the pilot's operating handbook for a Rockwell Commander states there are 5 separate points to drain the fuel system to check for water contamination before the first flight of the day. In particular, if water is found in the gas collator, the wing and wheel sumps should be redrained until you can be confident there is no water remaining. Avgas 100LL, which stands for low lead fuel, is light blue in colour, and water will sink to the bottom of the sample if it is present. Now, in certain light conditions, it can be quite difficult to distinguish the light blue colour from water, and the AAIB have shown how this can be the case in their report using the actual fuel recovered from the crash. You can see that the 100% water sample is very similar to the 100% fuel sample, especially when you have a certain background and light conditions. And on testing, the AAIB have shown that given the amount of contamination that was actually present in 9-8 Whiskey's tanks, the pilot might have filled a drain tube with 100% water and easily mistaken it for fuel. But visual reference isn't the only thing you should be looking at and smelling at when you check for water contamination of a fuel sample. You should give it a smell and test it for evaporation by spilling a small amount on the floor. However, that last point can be contentious. Some aerodromes don't like it as it can damage tarmac, and in certain jurisdictions, especially in Europe, it's actually illegal to discard fuel onto surfaces in that way. The problem with the smell test is that if you, for example, test one point of the sump and you get a fuel sample, it will obviously smell like fuel. You then discard that to wherever you discard it to, and then test another sump. That might be 100% water, but you'll still have a residual smell of the first test, and that can be fairly misleading. So to summarise, the initial findings from this crash on the 23rd of December 2024 was that the fuel system was significantly contaminated with water, and that was the cause of a rough running and loss of power to the engine. The AAIB are continuing to investigate how the fuel system could come to have such significant water contamination, especially given that the caps were only recently refurbished. But it is clear that for whatever reason, the pre-flight inspection was not effective in removing all of the water present in the fuel system. Additionally, what's confusing in this crash is that the engine was running for 26 minutes before it lost power. Now, you might expect things to have started to go wrong a lot sooner when the aircraft was on the ground, given the fact that water will sink to the bottom of a fuel tank. Other things to consider are the handling after the loss of power. Why wasn't the pilot able to carry out a safe but forced landing into the fields? No timescales have been given for the publication of a full report, but whether it's part of an AAIB bulletin or published as a more formal report, we'll bring it to you here on Final Descent UK. Thanks for watching. Remember to comment, like and subscribe. Bye bye.